Maria had always been used to quiet nights. The world outside seemed to slow down after midnight, and in her small town, the streets grew empty and still. She often said that her work hours made her feel as if she lived in a different world, one where the stars were her only company and the silence of hallways became familiar music. She worked as a night cleaner in a budget motel, and though it was not a glamorous job, it was honest work, and it kept food on the table for her and her teenage son. Her life had not been easy. Years earlier, she lost her husband in an accident, and ever since then she had carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. People often described her as strong, but Maria never thought of herself that way. She simply believed she had no other choice. There was rent to pay, bills to settle, and her son's education to think about. Giving up was never an option. Every night, while most people were asleep, she carried her cleaning cart down long corridors, pushing it from room to room. The cart rattled softly with bottles of disinfectant, folded towels, and fresh bed sheets. The scent of cleaning liquid clung to her clothes, and her hands were often dry from soap and water. Yet, there was a quiet dignity in her work. She liked the feeling of making a room fresh again, knowing that someone tired from travel would open the door and find a clean space to rest. Maria's shift usually began around 10 at night. She would see the day staff leaving as she arrived, exchanging tired smiles and short greetings. By midnight, the motel would fall silent. The lobby lights dimmed, the parking lot stood still, and the only sound was the soft hum of the vending machine near the reception desk. Sometimes, she would catch a glimpse of a guest walking to their room after a late arrival, but most nights were uneventful. Despite the silence, Maria never felt completely alone. She often thought about her son, Daniel, who was asleep at home. He was 16, a bright boy with big dreams of studying engineering. Maria always carried his image in her heart as she worked. Every hour she spent cleaning and tidying was, in her mind, a step toward giving him a better future. This thought gave her strength when her back ached or her eyelids grew heavy from fatigue. On nights when she felt particularly tired, she reminded herself that she was not just cleaning rooms, she was building a life for her son. She wanted Daniel to know that nothing was impossible if one worked hard enough. Maria often whispered small prayers as she straightened pillows or wiped mirrors, asking for health and courage to keep going. The motel itself was an old building, with faded carpets and squeaky doors. It had seen better days, but it remained busy because it was affordable. Travelers stopped there on long journeys, truck drivers used it for rest, and sometimes families booked rooms when they were passing through town. Maria had seen all kinds of people, those who were kind and polite, those who were in a hurry, and those who barely noticed her presence. She never judged them, she only did her work quietly, grateful that she had a steady job. But working nights came with its own challenges. There were times when Maria felt lonely. The world was asleep, and she was awake, moving through dimly lit corridors. Sometimes her imagination played tricks on her, and the empty silence felt heavy. On such nights, she hummed softly to herself or thought of the times when life had been different, when her husband was alive, when the house was filled with laughter, and when her work hours were lighter. Yet, Maria did not allow herself to dwell on sadness for long. She had grown used to accepting life as it came, focusing on the present rather than what could have been. She believed that small acts of endurance built strength, and every night she chose to endure, to keep moving forward. Her co-workers respected her. Though they only met briefly during shift changes, they knew Maria as a reliable woman who never complained. She rarely spoke about her personal life, but people sensed that behind her quiet smile lay many untold stories. She was the kind of person who listened more than she spoke, and that made others trust her naturally. The motel manager often praised her for her dedication. While others might have called in sick or avoided late hours, Maria was always there. She had never missed a night shift unless it was absolutely unavoidable. The manager once told her, "Maria, you're the backbone of this place." She simply smiled and said, "I just do my part." What made Maria's story interesting was not only her strength but also her kindness. Even when she was tired, she went out of her way to help guests who looked lost or confused. She once helped an elderly couple carry their bags to their room, even though it was not part of her duties. Another time, she gave a cup of hot tea to a traveler who was shivering in the cold lobby. She believed that kindness did not cost anything, but it could make a big difference to someone in need. Her nights were predictable, but in their predictability lay a rhythm that gave her comfort. She started with the ground floor, then moved upward, dusting, vacuuming, and refreshing every space. At around 2 a.m., she usually took a short break in the laundry room, sipping tea from a small flask she carried. She liked those quiet minutes, sitting on a stool surrounded by the scent of detergent, listening to the machines spin. It was her little moment of peace before continuing her work. Although life was hard, Maria never complained to her son. To Daniel, she always smiled and told him to focus on his studies. She wanted him to believe that their struggles were temporary, that one day he would achieve something greater. She often reminded him, "Education is your ticket to a different life." Daniel admired his mother deeply and promised himself that he would make her proud. People often underestimate those who work behind the scenes, like cleaners, janitors, and night staff. But Maria believed every role had value. She liked to think that even though guests might never know her name, they would feel her effort in the fresh bed sheets and tidy rooms. That thought alone gave her a quiet sense of pride. And so, on that particular night, Maria followed the same routine as always. She pushed her cart down the second-floor hallway, her footsteps soft on the carpet. She was thinking about Daniel's upcoming school project when she noticed something unusual: the faint sound of coughing coming from a room she knew was supposed to be vacant. She paused, listening carefully. The cough came again, weak and uneven. Maria frowned slightly, her instinct for responsibility awakening. Guests sometimes entered the wrong room, or a booking mistake might have occurred. But there was something in that sound, something that pulled at her natural sense of care. She hesitated for a moment, then gently knocked on the door, not realizing that this small act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Maria stood outside the door for a moment, her hand still resting on the cart. The coughing inside grew louder, followed by a low groan. She felt a wave of worry wash over her. Normally, if she heard something unusual, she would call the night manager, but tonight she couldn't ignore the sound. Something about it felt urgent, as if someone inside truly needed help. She knocked softly at first. "Hello? Is everything all right in there?" she called, her voice gentle but clear. There was no reply, only another bout of coughing. After a few seconds, she knocked again, louder this time. "Sir? Madam? Do you need help?" The door creaked open slowly, and Maria stepped back in surprise. A young man stood before her, leaning heavily against the frame. His face was pale, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. His eyes looked tired, almost feverish, and his breathing was uneven. He seemed like he had been fighting an illness for days. I'm fine," he muttered weakly, trying to wave her off, but it was clear he was not fine at all. His voice trembled, and his body swayed as if he might collapse at any moment. Maria's motherly instinct took over. "No, you are not fine," she said firmly but kindly. "You look very sick. Please, sit down before you fall." Without waiting for his permission, she pushed the door open wider and guided him gently toward the bed. The young man did not resist, he was too exhausted to argue. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn shut. A half-empty bottle of water sat on the nightstand, and an untouched sandwich lay on the table. Clearly, he hadn't eaten properly. Maria pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, studying him carefully. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. The man shook his head. "Just tired, just need some rest." He coughed again, clutching his chest. Maria reached for her bag. She always carried a few essentials with her: a small bottle of pain reliever, some cough drops, and a packet of herbal tea bags. They were for her own use, but tonight she felt compelled to share. She poured some water from the jug in the room into a glass, dropped in a cough drop, and handed it to him. "Here, sip this slowly. It will ease your throat." He hesitated for a moment, then took it with trembling hands. His fingers were elegant, not like those of a laborer. They looked like the hands of someone who had never done heavy work in his life. Maria noticed this but said nothing. As he drank, she observed him more closely. His clothes, though wrinkled from travel, were expensive. His shoes were designer, and even the watch on his wrist looked costly. She had cleaned enough rooms to know the difference between cheap and luxury. Yet here he was, lying sick in a budget motel room at 3 in the morning. Something about that picture did not make sense. Maria decided not to ask too many questions. Right now, what mattered was that he was unwell. She fetched a clean towel from the bathroom, soaked it in cold water, and gently placed it on his forehead. He closed his eyes, sighing with relief at the cool touch. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice faint but sincere. Maria smiled softly. "Rest. I will stay here a little while, just to make sure you are all right." She sat quietly by his side, occasionally checking his temperature and encouraging him to sip more water. The minutes turned into nearly an hour. Slowly, the young man's breathing steadied, and he drifted into a light sleep. Maria looked around the room while he rested. His suitcase was tucked under the table, and beside it lay a leather briefcase. Both looked expensive, yet oddly out of place in this old motel. She thought about calling the manager but decided against it. Something in her heart told her this man needed privacy, not questions. Sometimes, kindness meant giving space. When he stirred awake again, the fever had lowered slightly. He looked at her with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Maria shrugged gently. "Because you needed help. That is enough reason." He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to understand her simple logic. Most people in his world, he thought, would have asked for something in return: money, favors, connections. Yet here was this woman, a motel cleaner, sitting by his side at 3 in the morning, asking for nothing at all. He introduced himself finally. "My name is Arjun," he said quietly. Maria nodded. "Rest, Arjun. You need strength. We can talk more later." For the next 2 days, Maria continued to check in on him whenever she could. She brought him warm tea from the staff kitchen, extra blankets when the nights grew cold, and gentle conversation when he looked lonely. She never pried, but slowly, Arjun began to open up. One evening, while sipping tea, he confessed, "I wasn't supposed to be here. I'm far from home, and I'm hiding." His eyes looked troubled, as if he carried a heavy burden. Maria tilted her head, listening but not pushing him. "Hiding? From what?" she asked softly. Arjun took a deep breath. "From a life I don't want. My family is wealthy, very wealthy. They own businesses, properties, everything people usually dream of. But with all that wealth comes control. My parents arranged a marriage for me to someone I hardly know. They say it's for business, for family honor. But I don't want it. I don't love her. I don't even know her. So I ran." Maria sat in silence, processing his words. She had always imagined that rich people lived easier lives, free from the struggles of ordinary folk. But here was a young man with everything money could buy, yet still running away, searching for peace. "You must think I'm foolish," Arjun said bitterly. "Running away from luxury, from comfort. People would give anything to live the life I have." Maria shook her head. "No, I don't think you're foolish. I think you are human. Everyone deserves freedom to choose their own life, their own happiness." Money cannot give that. Her words struck him deeply. No one had spoken to him like that before, without judgment, without envy, only with simple truth. For the first time in days, Arjun felt lighter. He realized that this woman, who lived such a modest life, understood something that his wealthy world had never taught him, the value of freedom and kindness. That night, as Maria left the room quietly to continue her duties, Arjun watched her go with a strange sense of comfort. He felt safe in her presence, even though she was a stranger. Perhaps it was her calm nature, or the way she treated him like a person instead of a burden. Whatever it was, he knew he had found an unexpected friend in the most unlikely of places. And Maria, though she did not fully understand his world of wealth and arranged marriages, felt a quiet responsibility toward him. She sensed his loneliness, and she could not turn away. Something told her that this encounter was only the beginning of a story much larger than either of them could imagine. The days following Arjun's confession brought both closeness and challenges. Maria continued with her nightly duties, yet she always found a few minutes to check on him. She would knock softly at his door, carrying a cup of tea or a bowl of warm soup she managed to get from the staff kitchen. At first, Arjun felt embarrassed that a motel cleaner was taking care of him, but soon he grew used to her presence. In fact, he began to wait for her visits, as they were the only moments in his day that brought him comfort. But outside the quiet walls of that small motel room, his world was still chasing him. Arjun knew it was only a matter of time before his family's people tracked him down. He had left in a hurry, taking only a suitcase, a briefcase, and a false name he used to check in. For a man who had grown up with every luxury, he now lived in hiding, relying on the kindness of a stranger. One evening, when Maria entered the room after finishing her cleaning rounds, she noticed the worry etched on his face. He was staring out of the window, the curtains drawn only halfway. "You're troubled," she said softly, placing a cup of tea on the nightstand. Arjun sighed deeply. "They will come for me. My family doesn't give up easily. They will search until they find me. I thought I could run far enough, but I don't know if I was foolish to believe that." Maria sat down across from him. "Are you afraid?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Not of them. I've lived under their control all my life. What I fear most is being forced back into a life I don't want. I thought money meant freedom. But in my world, it's a chain. Every choice I make is tied to the family name, to business, to appearances. Even love is a business deal." Maria listened quietly. She did not fully understand the world of wealth and power, but she understood the feeling of being trapped. After her husband's death, she too had felt trapped by responsibilities, by circumstances she had not chosen. She nodded gently. "You are not alone. Many people carry chains. Some are heavy with money, some with poverty. But a chain is still a chain. The question is, are you willing to break it, even if it costs you?" Her words made Arjun think deeply. He realized that freedom always came with a price. The question was whether he was ready to pay it. But their quiet talks soon faced interruption. On the third night after Arjun's confession, strange men came into the motel lobby. Maria noticed them when she went to refill her cleaning cart. They were dressed sharply, out of place for such a small-town motel. They spoke quickly with the receptionist, showing what looked like a photo. Maria's heart tightened. She had a feeling she knew who they were looking for. She returned to her cleaning duties, trying not to draw attention, but her mind raced. Should she warn Arjun? Should she stay silent and let things unfold? She knew it was risky. Getting involved in someone else's affairs could cost her job. But then she thought of the weak young man she had seen coughing in the middle of the night, the one who had trusted her with his truth. She couldn't simply hand him over. Later, when the men went upstairs, Maria quickly slipped into Arjun's room. He was sitting at the desk, scribbling in a notebook. "You must be careful," she whispered. "There are men here asking questions. I believe they are looking for you." His face paled instantly. He stood, his hands trembling. Already? They found me this quickly. Maria placed a steady hand on his arm. Stay calm. Don't open your door. I will try to keep them away. For the next hour, Maria moved through the hallways, pretending to be busy with her cleaning cart. She noticed the men stopping by several doors, knocking, and asking questions. When they came near Arjun's room, Maria deliberately spilled her cleaning supplies in the corridor, making a small commotion. The men grew impatient, muttered something under their breath, and moved on. Arjun, peeking through the peephole, watched her with disbelief. When she returned later, he shook his head. Why did you do that? You could get into trouble. You don't even know me well enough to take such risks. Maria smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I know what it means to be helpless. If I were in your place, I would hope someone would protect me too. Her words touched him more deeply than he could say. He realized that in his entire life of wealth and luxury, he had never experienced such pure kindness. Everyone around him had always wanted something: money, power, or favors. Maria wanted nothing. But challenges did not stop there. The men returned the next night, more determined than before. This time, they lingered longer, checking car plates in the parking lot, questioning staff, and keeping an eye on the entrances. Arjun grew restless, pacing his room. I can't stay here much longer. They'll find me, and I don't want to drag you into this mess. Maria looked at him calmly. Then what will you do? Keep running forever? Arjun fell silent. He had not thought that far ahead. All he knew was that he did not want to return home. But he had no plan, no allies, and no one he could trust except Maria. That night, Maria returned home with her thoughts heavy. As she prepared breakfast for her son in the morning, Daniel noticed her quietness. Are you okay, Mom? He asked. She smiled weakly. Just tired, Daniel. Work has been different these days. She could not tell him about Arjun, but she carried the weight of secrecy alone. At work, she continued balancing her duties while protecting Arjun. It was not easy. Every moment felt tense, as if the walls of the motel were closing in. She knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. And yet, in those difficult days, something unexpected blossomed: a bond between two very different worlds. Arjun began sharing more of his story. He told her about growing up in mansions, surrounded by servants, attending schools abroad, and traveling in private jets. To Maria, it sounded like another universe. But as he spoke, she noticed the sadness in his tone. None of those luxuries had brought him happiness. In return, Maria shared pieces of her own life: how she raised Daniel alone, how every paycheck mattered, and how she found joy in small things like her son's laughter or a simple cup of tea after a long night. Arjun listened intently, humbled by her strength. Through their conversations, Arjun realized something profound: Maria, who had so little compared to him, lived with more peace and honesty than he ever had. She carried burdens, yet she did not let them steal her kindness. She had no wealth, yet she was richer in spirit than anyone he knew. But challenges pressed harder. The family's men became more aggressive in their search, and Maria knew the motel would not remain safe for long. Each day felt like a test of courage, as if fate was pushing both of them toward a breaking point. And though Maria tried to hide her worry behind her steady smile, she felt the weight of fear growing heavier. She was just a cleaner, a single mother working night shifts. What power did she have against the reach of wealth and influence that chased Arjun? Yet, deep inside, Maria also knew one thing with certainty: sometimes, ordinary people could make extraordinary choices. And perhaps, her choice to stand by Arjun, no matter the risks, was about to lead both of them into the most defining chapter of their lives. The tension inside the motel grew heavier with each passing night. For Maria, the hallways no longer felt like the quiet, predictable places she once knew. Every shadow seemed to carry a secret, every knock on the door made her heart beat faster. She had always thought of the motel as just another workplace, but now it had become a shelter, a hiding place for a young man whose life was far more complicated than she ever imagined. Arjun tried to appear calm, but his restlessness betrayed him. He spent hours pacing the small room, peeking through the blinds, and scribbling in a notebook as though he was planning his escape. His fever had passed, but a new anxiety replaced it. He knew that running away had only bought him time. Sooner or later, his past would catch up. Maria noticed the change in him. One evening, when she entered his room with a tray of tea and bread, she found him sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. "You cannot live like this, Arjun," she said gently. "You are wearing yourself down." He lifted his head, his eyes tired but determined. "I'm not afraid for myself anymore. What frightens me is that I've dragged you into this. You don't deserve to live with this fear." Maria placed the tray on the table and sat opposite him. "Do not think like that. I chose to help you. Fear is part of life, but what matters is what we do in the face of it." Her calmness soothed him, but the fear outside their door was real. That very night, the men returned again, this time more insistent. Maria saw them questioning the receptionist and walking up and down the halls as if they were closing in. She hurried to Arjun's room, her hands trembling. "They're here again," she whispered urgently as she shut the door behind her. "They are not giving up this time." Arjun's face turned pale. "If they find me, it's over. They'll drag me back. I'll lose everything I've been fighting for." Maria thought quickly. She was no strategist, just a cleaner who had lived through her share of struggles, but her instincts told her she had to act fast. She looked around the room, then at Arjun. "Pack your things. You can't stay here tonight." Arjun hesitated. "Where will I go?" "To the laundry room," she replied firmly. "No one checks there at this hour. They think of it only as a place for sheets and towels, not for people." Without another word, Arjun stuffed a few essentials into his bag while Maria guided him through the hallway. She pushed her cleaning cart in front of them, using it as cover whenever they passed open doors. Her heart pounded with every step, but she kept her face calm, pretending to be just another staff member on her shift. At one point, she spotted two men at the end of the hallway. Quickly, she bent down, pretending to tie her shoe, giving Arjun time to slip into the laundry room unnoticed. She followed soon after, locking the door behind them. Inside, the room was filled with the hum of machines and the smell of detergent. Arjun leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "You risk everything for me," he whispered. Maria shook her head. "I risk nothing compared to what you risk by living a lie. You want freedom? Then you must fight for it." They stayed hidden there for hours, listening to footsteps outside. At one point, the door rattled slightly, and Maria froze, holding her breath. But the sound passed, and silence returned. Arjun sat quietly, his thoughts racing. He had never been so vulnerable before. All his life, he had been shielded by wealth, guarded by people, surrounded by luxury. Yet in this moment, his safety depended not on money but on the courage of a woman who had nothing to give except her heart and her strength. When the footsteps finally faded and the night grew still, Maria allowed him to return to his room. "They will not stop searching," she said firmly. "You must decide soon what your next step will be." The following day, Arjun received news that shook him. Through a message sent by a trusted friend back home, he learned that his family had already announced the wedding date. It was to take place in just a few weeks. His chest tightened at the thought. The world he had run from was pulling him back with even stronger force. That evening, he shared the news with Maria. "I can't run forever. They'll find me eventually. Maybe I should just go back and accept it." Maria looked at him with steady eyes. "And live the rest of your life in a cage? Is that the man you want to be?" He shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. I don't know what kind of man I want to be. I only know I don't want to be a prisoner. Her voice softened. Then you must be brave, Arjun. Brave not just to run, but to stand up and say no. That is harder than running. Her words struck him like lightning. All his life, he had run from expectations, from duty, from choices others made for him. Maybe it was time to stop running and face the storm head-on. That night became the turning point. Arjun decided that he would not allow his family to dictate his future any longer. But before he could confront them, he needed time and strength to prepare. Maria encouraged him, offering her quiet support. She reminded him that freedom was not given, it was taken, earned through courage. Yet danger still lurked close. 2 nights later, the men returned again, more aggressive this time. Maria overheard them telling the manager that they had important business with one of the guests. They insisted on seeing the guest list. Fear pricked at her heart. If they discovered Arjun's false name, everything would unravel. Acting quickly, Maria went to the manager. She spoke calmly, convincing him that the men were disturbing the peace of the motel. Our guests come here for rest, not for interrogation, she said firmly. The manager hesitated but eventually asked the men to leave, at least for the night. When Maria told Arjun what had happened, he was stunned. You stood up to them? Maria, they are powerful men. You could lose your job. She smiled faintly. Jobs come and go. But what matters is doing what feels right. For Arjun, that moment was the climax of his journey so far. It was no longer about hiding or escaping, it was about realizing that he had the right to choose his own path. Watching Maria risk herself for him, with nothing to gain, gave him a kind of courage he had never known. He looked at her with gratitude. You've done more for me than anyone in my life. You have no reason to fight for me, but you did. Why? Maria thought for a moment. Because sometimes life gives us a chance to help someone in a way that matters. If I walk away, I might regret it forever. But if I help, maybe, just maybe, it will change something. Arjun's heart swelled with emotions he could not express. He realized that while he had been running from a forced future, he had also been running towards something he didn't expect, a lesson in courage, kindness, and the true meaning of freedom. That night, as the motel finally grew silent again, Arjun sat by the window, staring at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity. He would not run anymore. He would face his family, not with anger, but with the truth of his own voice. And it was all because a woman named Maria, a motel cleaner with a tired smile and gentle hands, had shown him that even the simplest life could carry the greatest strength. The conflict was far from over, but the decision was made. The storm was coming, and Arjun was ready to walk into it not alone, but with the memory of Maria's courage guiding him forward. The night after Arjun made his decision was the first time Maria saw peace on his face. He still looked tired, but his eyes carried a quiet strength that had not been there before. It was as if the heavy fog of fear had lifted, replaced by a light of determination. For days, he had been running without direction, but now he finally knew where he was headed. Maria sensed the change in him. When she brought him a cup of warm tea, she said softly, "You look different today." Arjun smiled faintly. "For the first time in years, I feel like myself. I don't know what will happen when I face them, but I know one thing: I won't be silent anymore." Maria nodded. "That is enough. Speaking your truth is always the beginning of freedom." In the following days, Arjun began preparing himself. He made calls to a few trusted people from his life, friends he believed would understand his choice. He knew not everyone would support him, but he needed at least some allies. Maria encouraged him quietly, reminding him that courage often begins in small steps. But even as he planned, he carried deep gratitude for Maria. Without her, he would never have reached this point. He would have remained a frightened young man, hiding in a motel room, unsure of what to do. One evening, he told her openly, "You saved me, Maria. Not just from sickness, but from losing myself. You gave me courage I didn't know I had." Maria smiled, though her eyes softened with emotion. "I didn't save you, Arjun. You saved yourself. I only reminded you of what you already carried inside." For Maria, the whole experience had also been life-changing. She had always thought of herself as just a cleaner, someone who worked quietly in the background. But through helping Arjun, she realized that small acts of kindness could ripple into something far greater. She saw how even her simple care had touched the life of someone from a completely different world. When the day finally came for Arjun to leave, there was a quiet sadness in the air. Maria walked him to the back entrance of the motel, where he would meet a friend who promised to drive him to the airport. His suitcase was packed, his briefcase secure in his hand, but his heart was heavy with the thought of leaving. At the door, he paused. "Maria, I don't know if I will ever be able to repay you." Maria shook her head gently. "You owe me nothing. Just live the life you want. That will be enough for me." Arjun hesitated, then pulled out a small envelope from his pocket. "This is not repayment. It is just a token of thanks. Please, accept it." Maria looked at the envelope but did not take it. "I don't need money, Arjun. I need nothing from you. All I wish is that you stay true to yourself." He looked at her with deep respect. "You are unlike anyone I've ever met." He tucked the envelope back into his bag, realizing that her dignity was more valuable than anything inside. Their goodbye was simple but heartfelt. Arjun stepped into the car, and Maria watched as it drove away, disappearing into the distance. She stood there for a long time, her hands folded together, whispering a quiet prayer for his safety. Then she returned to her duties, as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet inside, everything had changed. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. She pushed her cart through the hallways, cleaned the rooms, and greeted guests with her gentle smile. But sometimes, late at night, she thought of Arjun. She wondered if he had stood up to his family, if he had found the courage to say no to the life they had chosen for him. She hoped he was safe, wherever he was. One afternoon, weeks later, Maria received a letter. It had no return address, only her name written neatly on the envelope. She opened it with curiosity, and as she read, her eyes filled with tears. It was from Arjun. In the letter, he wrote about how he had gone back home and finally faced his parents. He had told them firmly that he would not marry someone against his will, no matter what they said. At first, his parents had been furious, threatening him with consequences. But when they saw his determination, something shifted. Though they did not fully agree, they began to realize that their son was no longer a boy to be controlled, but a man who wanted his own life. Arjun wrote that it had not been easy. He had faced arguments, cold silences, and even the risk of being cut off from the family wealth. But none of that mattered to him anymore. What mattered was that he finally spoke his truth. And then, at the end of the letter, he thanked Maria once again. He wrote, "You may think you only helped me for a few nights, but what you gave me will last forever. You gave me freedom. I will never forget the woman who showed me that kindness and courage can be found in the simplest places." As Maria folded the letter, she noticed a folded note tucked inside. It was a receipt of an anonymous donation to a college fund enough to cover Daniel's entire education. Maria's hands trembled as she realized what Arjun had done. He had kept his promise in a way she never expected. She sat quietly for a long time, tears rolling down her cheeks, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. She had never asked for anything, yet life had given her back more than she could have imagined. That evening, when Daniel returned home, she hugged him tightly. "You will go to college, my son," she whispered. "Your future is safe." Daniel looked at her with surprise. "But how, Mom? We could never afford it." Maria smiled through her tears. A friend helped us. A very unexpected friend. In the years that followed, Maria often thought of Arjun. She never saw him again, but his memory lived in her heart like a quiet light. Whenever she felt tired or burdened, she reminded herself of the night when kindness had changed not only his life but hers as well. She continued her work at the motel, but she no longer saw herself as just a cleaner. She saw herself as someone who mattered, someone who could touch lives in ways she had never imagined. The encounter with Arjun had taught her that true richness was not in money, but in compassion, courage, and the strength to do what is right. And somewhere, far away, Arjun lived his new life free, honest, and grateful. Perhaps he built a future different from the one his family had planned, perhaps he found love on his own terms, perhaps he walked a road filled with challenges. But one thing was certain, he never forgot the woman who gave him shelter at 3 a.m., who cared for him without asking for anything, and who reminded him of the value of freedom. Maria's story was never written in books or told in headlines, but it was real. A simple act of kindness at a lonely hour had changed two lives forever. And every time Maria walked through the quiet hallways of the motel, pushing her cart under the soft glow of the lights, she carried that memory with her. It was a reminder that even the smallest person, doing the simplest job, could make the greatest difference in the world.